Good afternoon. Welcome to our Business Agility video podcast. So each week we spend 30 minutes exploring business and technology topics for growing businesses in Canada. So as we all are being safe here in the world of 2020, what we're going to do is today is have a holiday drink and put 2020 behind us. And then we're going to look forward to planning for 2021. So our panelists today are Samantha DeForge, myself, Murray Quibel, and we are highlighted today by our guest panelist, Kent Boehm. So Kent is Canada's #1 business coach, and he's a business accelerator and master coach at 9 Business Group. So as always, our format is interactive. We invite questions from our webinar attendees that have joined us live here, as well as our Facebook live stream. We'll start with panelist introductions, and then we'll get right into our topic. So with that, I'll introduce myself quickly. I'm Murray Quibel, the president of Accurate Solutions. Now, we are a cloud ERP solutions provider, but more importantly and relevant for our topic today, we are a small and growing business in Western Canada. So regarding Kent, I've known him personally for many years, including the last two years formally working with Kent as our business coach. So what I found with Kent, he's direct, he's practical, and perfect for our topic today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kent for a quick intro, and I really want to ask Kent the question, what's it like to be Canada's #1 business coach, and maybe share a life in the day of that. So with that, Kent, over to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the very warm introduction. What is a day in the life of a business coach or Canada's #1 business coach? I like to say, as a business coach, if it's not boring, I'm probably doing it wrong. And so for most days, it's pretty boring. On any given week, I see on a peak week 17 to 20 different clients, and I work with various people within each of those organizations. And for me, it's a lot of fun and stimulating because even though we're working on the same fundamental things within each business, at any point in time, there's unique things that are different for each business. So for example, 4 hours ago, I met with a client of mine, Done Right Roofing. He's a young fella who had the opportunity to buy an existing roofing company last spring. And even though he has lots of revenue, he's still struggling with some of the business systems and processes that a more mature business would have, like workflow, job description, profitability statements, and whatnot. So for me, I get to work with 15 to 20 business owners at any point in time at various different things. So it's kind of like eating at a buffet, and every week's a bit different. You get the best of everything, and at the same time, you get the best of the clients. And I'm very fortunate to have a good, stable base of clients who have been with me for 2+ and even 3 and 4 years. And so we're getting into the fun part of coaching, which is really about lifestyle, quality of life, profitability, and really getting their teams to work independently without the owner. So I don't know if that's a day in the life, but that's sort of what I enjoy about my job and what makes it fun for me.
Keeps it interesting, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And my name is Samantha DeForge. I work with Accurate Solutions as the business specialist. And we have been doing these podcasts now actively since September, since we started them. And we will be posting a re-registration link for our Zoom coming out in our next newsletter. So if you do want to join, and of course, our current registrants will also receive a follow-up email to re-register for the new podcast series starting in January. So Kent, when it comes to being Canada's #1 business coach, let's hear what you heard about this year, 2020. The reason a lot of people, are, scrambling, or they didn't know what to do with their technologies, or they didn't know what to do with their businesses. And what have you seen in the market as far as being Canada's business coach?
Great question. What I've seen is everything from chaos, pandemonium, people literally putting their heads in the sand, waiting for the world to just pass by, in avoidance. I mean, maybe that's the best word to use, is many thousands, hundreds, thousands. I would say even in my own client base, 10% of our clients just hid it and didn't want to acknowledge it, didn't want to accept it. What was really fun is when we're looking
Hey, hang on a sec, Kent, before you go there, did everyone grab their holiday drink? Because before we start to get too deep into 2020, we will have to first...
Does it count if it's full of vodka?
Yeah, I'm not telling what's in my drink here. But sorry, can't I interrupt?
No, it's all good.
The key thing is that, let's have a little bit of fun with this and make sure you got your drink there.
So should I be right back?
So what I think makes it interesting is in April, May, when we were in the midst of the pandemic and a shutdown with lots of noise and uncertainty, there was lots of panic and lots of fear. And since July, August, when Alberta alone has sort of started to loosen their restrictions and help navigate keeping businesses back open, a lot of businesses have come back to life, and that's been very fantastic to see, both here in Western Canada, but around the world, Eastern Canada, whatever. And yeah, there's some industries that are absolutely trashed, reduced to fractions of revenue than what they used to have. And other businesses are booming. I have a number of clients that are up significantly year over year. And so it just is this handful of businesses that it's impacting every industry and every sector differently, but it's really, what I'm also finding is how it's impacting the business is as much about the business ownership and leadership as it is the business or the industry. Mm. So like Mike, most things in life, it's what we choose to do in the middle of it that counts the most.
Yeah, geez, I've heard that a lot, Kent. And like I said, we're on Kent being practical and direct. I've heard that message many times, and I think in some cases, I know you've made the statement many times, is that sometimes, and I don't know if you have a stat around this, but however many times you might have to explain a concept and maybe a number of times, and then all of a sudden maybe it's a year later or 2 years later, you've had clients come to you and go, "Hey, Kent, remember what you were talking about 2 years ago? Well, now I know what you're talking about." Hey,
sure. But how does I think like when we talk about, what's happened this year, and I want to talk about planning a bit too, because, Ken, I know you're very keen and you always say, plan it out. But with 2020 throwing such a curveball, not only for Canada, but for the rest of the world, how is a business, expected to plan for an event like that? And should this be something that now everyone's experiencing, that they have to plan forward?
Well, to have a little fun with it, planning backwards isn't going to do us any good. So I hope we're planning forward. And I think what we've realized more importantly is Alberta alone, the world right now is in a rate of change of once every 5 to 7 years. If we think back to 1967, 1972, kind of when the microchip, the microprocessor was first introduced, since that time, rate of change continues to shorten. And now we're in a rate of change of, once every 5 to 7 years. So whether we're in a pandemic, an economic crisis, dealing with anything, what we've come to realize more important than ever is we need to have a view or an outlook into the 10-year. We need to kind of have a 3 to 5 sentence paragraph that kind of describes what business we want to be in and what we want our business to look like in 10 years. And what we do with our clients, we then pair that back to kind of the same thing on a 5-year description. You can give it some revenue numbers, some profit targets, number of employees, some general, just to set the direction. I've been a huge begin with the end in mind guy, fan for a long time. I read Covey, I think 30 years ago when I was 18 or 19. I loved it. And he was the guy for me that locked in that concept of begin with the end in mind. And as we look forward to 2021, we really have to have a crystal clear picture, not just of how we're going to achieve our goals, but what our goals are, whether it be for 2023 or 2021. The more specific we can be with those targets, that'll help us navigate the changes, because there's going to be changes and adjustments. I think even if we look realistically, not necessarily planning the next 12 months in quarterly increments, but really sitting down with our leadership teams, our management teams, and building out 60-day plans. What we've seen in the last 6 months is each government seems to be navigating how they manage the economic and pandemic crisis in closer to 60-day increments. So that gives our leadership teams a better chance to actually look at the next 60 days, make some decisions, execute them, and then kind of wait for the lay of the land to change and making necessary adjustments. So we're not necessarily changing our targets based on the pandemic or economic. In some cases, we've increased our targets. We've made the revenue targets higher. We've maybe had to soften on a few. But it's never about changing the targets, but how we navigate the course.
It's funny. I think a lot of people that used to really be the statement, for primarily in Alberta, Alberta goes through a swing every 5 to 7 years is what they said. And, having, a husband who was formerly in the energy industry, and, his experience as, it always seemed to be once every 5 or 7 years. And now it just seems like it's every 6 months, something has to go belly up, right? And it's just, you're being thrown curveballs. And I know that our federal government is in a state where they're not really keen on energy, but as far as fossil fuels go. But do you really think that it's a 5 to 7 year reset, or do you think it's starting to become more frequent than anything?
I wouldn't say the word reset. I think when we talk about a 3 to 5 year planning horizon for a business, we're not planning the business around an economic swing where the business has to set its own goals and objectives based on the needs and wants of the business. We have to adjust accordingly for the economic cycles. We have to put that into our SWOT analysis. It's one of those opportunities and threats categories is, who's in office, what's the lay of the land? And if we are creating a 5 or 10 year vision, is there an election in the middle of it? Is there a provincial election, a federal election? And what's the impact? So it's not, I wouldn't say we should be planning the business based on our economic swings, but we should planning and executing our business plan and then letting the economic changes help us navigate our strategies. No different than a pro sports team. You have a certain objective, whether it be a score number of points, say in football to get more touchdowns than the team you're playing, but you're going to adjust, the objective is to win the game, to outscore the other team. Your strategy and how you navigate each game is going to be slightly different based on your opponent. And no different than in business, sometimes the opponent is a physical competitor, and sometimes the opponent influencing your gameplay is the environment, is the economic times, or other things happen in business that you simply have to navigate around or against.
So do you feel, as far as businesses and the way that they've, let's say, planned out in January, December last year, they made out their corporate plans for what they're going to do in 2020. Do you feel like most businesses that you work with and, that are your clients, do you feel like they sort of panicked and then just sort of veered away from them? Or did you push them to stick with the plans? Did you tell them to modify the plans? What do you think a business should have done this year?
In hindsight, they should have had an advisor, a business coach, 12 to 18 months before the pandemic. So pandemic hits in March, April, May. They need to have a strong, stable team of culture and objectives in place 6 to 12, even 18 months well in advance of that happening. What we found is the businesses that weren't ready, I'm not saying a business coach is the end all and be all to having your business ready for a pandemic, but it sure helps because when we looked at the advice that was being given, if I had 15 clients in my stable then, any of the clients that were relatively new to me in the first 3 months of the year really had a hard time because they didn't have the systems and processes. They weren't strong enough, whether it be financially or cultural wise, to sustain any shifts. Any of my clients that had been with me for 2-3+ years have weathered the storm. Some have grown, but we've only had one long-term client really taken in the teeth, but that's more of an industry thing. It's outside of his control. But anybody who has been with us for a long time navigated better because what we're able to do is give it perspective. I think the most important thing is there's so much, quote unquote, negativity and negative energy surrounding the news cycle that if we spend too much time in our own head listening to social media, listening to the news, it affects our mojo, affects our energy, affects how our outlook. And so a business coach and outside advisor can be that sounding board and help talk through some of the negativity to give it perspective. And that's the biggest thing is early on in April, May, we were pivoting and adjusting week to week. And so without that weekly touch base, without a sober second thought, we did find clients not just deviating, but literally spiraling and losing control because they just kept locked in a circular pattern of thought that wasn't healthy.
Kent, a couple of thoughts I might have is one of the things we want to do, and we're about halfway through our podcast here, and we do want to get to some specific action items and tools and techniques that we can, and you touched on a few of them, but as we start to think towards 2021, we do want to get to some of those. But I want, maybe as you mentioned and talking about some of your customers or people that you've been dealing with over 2020, you mentioned a lot of them have grown. And can you just share, without, you can get into as much or a little detail, but maybe just share some stories about what you found to have been successful to allow some of the businesses that you've been dealing with to grow in, and what's been acknowledged as a really tough time for many.
Well, I think there's with every shift, there's a pattern and opportunities, and there's pros and cons, positives and negatives. And so if you can objectively look at a situation, for example, we can talk about our friend and colleague, Bob, who is with Wander Driven. His biggest opportunity that came his way is we need a certain type of sales rep with a certain type of experience that is typically found in the oil patch. And when COVID came along, a lot of that senior type of salesperson we needed and would benefit from. I mean, he posted a job ad, very tight, very specific, but over 100 resumes. And for a commission sales position, that is very unique. And so for him, because there was excess bodies in a certain field, he was able to take advantage of it. In another case, we talked earlier about the mindset of businesses. Well, some people took the opportunity to hide. Well, one of our clients in a remote town, her competition wasn't running a very good business to start with. He shuttered his doors mid-pandemic. Her business is up over 20%, not because because she had the right mindset. She chose to persevere through the hard bits and was rewarded with new business because her competition closed. And some of it is to even understanding the trend. I think Murray and I even talked back in March, April that people are going to spend money, and people go, what do you mean? Like, there's a pandemic? No. If you look around it's not everybody, but when I surveyed my peer group in March, April, and their biggest comment and complaint in our chat groups was, oh, my vacation was canceled. Well, I think I roughly added up somewhere to the tune of $200,000 to $400,000 of vacation money that came back to my friends. Well, they were going to spend it. And what did we see? There was two big things we saw this summer. Lumber stores ran out of wood. You couldn't build decks. Renovation companies are exploding. My brother runs a renovation company on Vancouver Island. Same thing. And the flip side was the other one. Secondhand, a friend of a friend owns a Lexus car dealership. No high-end cars. You think in a pandemic, this is going to be a tough business. July, best month ever in the history of that car dealership. So what we did find is the medium, the well-off people, white collar jobs, people who have, stable jobs, disposable money got spent. And so that was the other big thing is the business owners that were navigating this, realizing that was their client base, they doubled down. And so they did more marketing, they did more outreach. So they were more intentional bringing in more business because they realized that there's less competition for their clients' dollars.
I think online shopping probably would have, skyrocketed. I mean, I think there was a lot of people once they started working from home, I'm sure that there was a moment, and I know it happened to me when I started working remotely even 3 years ago, when, you start to sit there and you go through this phase of panic because you feel like you should be chained to your desk all the time. And then I think people got a little bit climatized to it and then, would, try to figure it out. But now, they're sitting at home where, their boss isn't around, and next thing you know, someone's shopping for shoes or a purse or a Dyson Airwrap. See? Finally, after a year of asking, my husband bought it for me for my anniversary. But I definitely believe it. I think as far as retail and shopping goes, our neighbors, they were building a deck all summer. They decided to do it themselves. People have taken on hobbies, and they went crazy, so to speak.
Yeah, I think
alcohol sales probably went up too.
Yeah. Speaking of which, cheers to everybody. And mine may or may not include alcohol in my drink. I'm not going to say. I think that what we've seen, I like your point that you made earlier, Kent, about just how the change, however long the cycle has been, what we've seen is a rapid change. And what we've seen even in our business is a rapid digital transformation. And what that means is that companies that may sit back and go, yeah, we think we can improve our business, but we'll get to that at some point in time. Or maybe we can start to have our customers engage with us online through an e-commerce store, but we'll get to that sometime. Well, we saw all of a sudden everything got turned on the ear and they needed to do it now, or they needed to do it this month or next month and things like that. We're starting to see some of that, that maybe they didn't do it then. We're starting to see some activity a lot right now. But again, that rapid digital transformation is exactly aligned with the change that we're seeing.
I think it's definitely e-commerce too. Like e-commerce went boom come June. Everyone, one of our clients went up. They have a huge retail store. We've mentioned it in previous podcasts, and that retail shop was just directly converted into web traffic. I think their commerce site was up 450%.
Yeah, they converted walk-in traffic to online, so their business was about the same, but it just rapidly changed, and they could do that because they already had an e-commerce store up and running, and really no effect to their business. So
let's talk about that.
Well, go ahead. Go ahead.
I like that because that's a great example, because if you think about that business, and if you want to give them a name, that's fine. But think about how ready they were.
Yeah.
Right. And that wasn't a March, April to 2020 thing. You think about the business planning and the work that those owners and that leadership put into that business 18, 24, 36 months ago. So when they were required to make a shift, the team was ready, the people were ready, and they were able to capture the moment. You think about their competition who probably wasn't ready, didn't have an e-commerce store, had to close down for a month. You know, and not only is that business closing down, but the one that stayed open and had an e-commerce site is picking up that market share. So just a real testament that in today's marketplace, we have to be more ready than ever before for the changes and shifts that are coming to us in the next 18 months for sure.
Well, and that comes back, Murray, to what Patty was saying last week or 2 weeks ago. We had our guest speaker, Patty. She's a credit card processing. She provided some statistics of the transitions that will happen with the e-commerce space. And this isn't rocket science. Everyone knows that this is coming. And I think, you know, although it hit hard here in April and May, the other aspect of it is, I know I was listening to the news a couple of days ago, and it was one of these doctors or something was saying, this isn't going to be the last pandemic. This is going to happen again. This isn't, you know, there was a Spanish flu, there was other types of flus, and that were just as detrimental. And with our population growing, people expanding, more transmission, you know, they're saying there will be another pandemic. It might happen now, it might happen in 6 months, it might happen in a year, it might happen in 20 years. They don't know. But I think as far as planning for 2021, hypothetically, what happens if another pandemic that is far more deadly hits in 2021?
Okay, hang on a sec, Sam. I want you to put your reindeer ears back on again. I don't want to but I think the point is valid. Is that let's not go there in the point of another pandemic. But I think what we've proven is that the rapid changing environment, and whether it's government or racial tensions or viruses, we've seen all those kinds of things. But whatever the catalyst is, we're seeing rapid change. So the question I would have for you, Kent, and then as we start to think towards 2021, because we have a balance here. The balance is planning towards a 3, 5, 10-year time frame, and the need to we acknowledge that everything goes out the window and we have to position in 60 days. But I want you to maybe share some ideas about how does one reconcile that? How does a company reconcile some of its medium to long-term goals with the need to be very agile and to almost pivot daily or weekly? And maybe just share some insights or tools or techniques that you're taking to some of your clients as we plan for 2021.
I think the first piece of advice I give my clients is let's apply pragmatic optimism. And what I mean by pragmatic optimism is, we've been in good economies, we've been in shit economies in Western Canada, but let's be optimistic. Let's take an optimistic view at your business, your clients, the lay of the land. And then apply some pragmatism, say that it's not going to be perfect. There's going to be some rainbows and roses and different things, but there's going to be some crap too. So we have to be pragmatically optimistic about our future. That's number one. Number two, we need to have a good path. And the path doesn't have to be clear, but we need a direction we want to take the business. And that's that 3 to 5 year vision. It's about how big do we want to be, number of employees, how do we want to serve our clients, how do we want to serve our community. You need to tighten that down, then really have a tight revenue and profit target for 2021. If you're 500,000 in sales this year and you think 625 is there, great. But don't make it 900,000 unless you have a real good handle on what it is. All right, we're going downhill skiing, perfect. And then if you're a $15 million business in your industry and there's been some changes where you can chase 20 million, great. Would be very specific. And then I would break that down, not into quarterly increments, but I'd literally break it down into 60-day sprints. If we look at kind of the major environmental health issues we've gone through with changes in how we're allowed to conduct business, they seem to be in 60-day increments. They're kind of giving us enough latitude to navigate the rules for about 60 days. And as a business owner, that's enough time for us to build and execute a strategy and get close to the end of that planning cycle and make the next round of adjustments. And so that would be if I could leave any of your audience with that message, that's the two. Number one, have a clear revenue and profit target for the end of the year. And number two, build 60-day sprints so that you allow that opportunity you can execute it, you have the right number of staff. And if something happens, even in week 5 or week 7 of that planning cycle, you can make your changes fast enough for week 1 of the next sprint.
So do you feel like most businesses, instead of planning out in quarters, planning out the entire year, should just simply replace that sort of logic and business planning and replace it with a 60-day sprint all the way around?
I would for the next 12 to 18 months for sure. Just for everything from travel, being able to, if you can think about planning a business trip for those of our larger clients who have clients and personnel in multiple cities, even planning a business trip to go visit your team members in other parts of the world can be difficult, and you probably can't plan 120 days out for that next business trip. But you probably can take a look and say, within some reasonableness, in the next 60 days, I can do this trip because if I look at that city, they have these rules. They just made this modification for travel. I can reasonably comfortably make that planning decision. Can you make that same planning decision about March of next year? No. But can we kind of look at, say, let's plan a trip to Vegas, right? Between now and January 31st. With some confidence, 89% confidence, we can make a decision as to whether we should or should not plan a trip to Vegas and what it might look like. Okay, well, I've been scheduled to go to Vegas in March to train some new coaches as a certified master coach. I have no idea if that's going to be in person or via Zoom or Skype or WebEx or whatever. It's not far out, but I could tell you if that planning session was in January, it's not happening. Yep. So I think a 60-day window is short enough to actually get a handle on for us to mentally approach it and give our team. And I think that's the other thing I'll leave with, a kind of a planning cycle for your audience, is having that 60-day window, but having the right conversation of get rid of the noise. Stop watching TV, turn the news off, get rid of the social media bullshit. There's so much negativity out there, and the spin doctoring is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So if you're as a strong leadership team, if you can work with your managers and frontline staff to get out of the news, do it. It will make your life so much easier behind the scenes, because, I don't know who watched the election. I did it this year, the US election. It was fun. I watched 4 different channels back and forth consistently. And it didn't matter what happened. Every channel had a different story. Well, facts are facts, people. How can you broadcast facts differently? But this is what our news channels and our cable channels are doing to us, is they're spinning it to their agenda. Well, guess what? The only most important thing in your agenda, in your world, is what's in your head, your business, your family. Start there and if something is important, someone will tell you.
I think there's a lot of validity to that, because, sorry, Murray, I guess.
Okay.
But I think there is a lot of validity to that. And I don't think, that it would be unheard of for companies to just completely go from corporate yearly planning to planning in sprints. Because, if we think about it, when we were in Vegas last year, we flew back January 30th. And within 60 days, Murray, the whole country just shut down. Everything went virtual. And nobody would have ever expected that. We were in the middle of Las Vegas, walking around people, taking planes. The pandemic was already kind of around. And then, within 60 days, boom.
It was in our back door.
Yeah, and so we just got a minute to wrap up. And that was, so what we had, that was the Acumatica partner, or the Acumatica Summit in Vegas. And they're trying to plan again this year. But as we've seen with many, everything, I expect that will go virtual. We haven't, right now they're planning for an in-person event similar, but holy man, I think we've done a great job as a community and of people all over the world to figure out how to pull off events virtually. And that's a big change. Some cases it works, it's more efficient, but hey, one of these days actually seeing people in person is probably a good thing. We should wrap up. A couple of thoughts, Kent. I know one of the things we probably didn't get into when we think about 60-day planning, just a quick thought about company culture and how that might start to drive some really specifics, and leave people with a couple of points as we wrap up here.
Company culture has never been more important. And what I will leave with, I think 15, 20 years ago, the marketplace, they talked about core values, but they looked at it from an outside-in perspective. So what core values do we think we want our clients to have? That's not the case. Core values are really about who we are as a corporation, what's important to us. They don't need to be public-facing. In fact, they 100% need to be inward-facing. And they only need to be 5 or 6. It needs to be 4, 5, 6 tops, but they're inward-facing. And the most important thing is, when they're strong enough, you can hire by them and you can fire by them. So really, our strength and our best clients and our best businesses have a strong internal culture, and they have the ability to attract and retain the right employees because they fit our ideology, they fit the way they think, and as they say, they get us. And when you can do that, you can do anything.
Cool. Thank you. That's a great idea.
Cool.
All right,
Sam,
well, we are at
last word?
last word is move to e-commerce if you sell anything physical.
And
Just
keep
do it.
keep a smile on your face. So I love the reindeer things. Like, and again, let's have a holiday drink. If you didn't have one now, grab one over the next few weeks, and let's have a nice bid 2020 solid goodbye, and let's raise a glass to 2021. Thanks for joining
Yeah, and
us.
don't forget to join us next week for our next one. I think we're going to be having Wes Scott, who will be talking about how events have shape-shifted over the course of 2020 and what to expect into 2021. So very excited.
Sounds great.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.